Harrison Kane stood frozen in his office doorway, his steel-gray eyes fixed on the woman behind his desk. Not just any woman. Shania Brown, his head housekeeper, sitting in his $1,000 leather chair as if she owned the place. His hands clenched at his sides as she looked up from his private business journal, completely unruffled by his towering presence. "You're not as ruthless as you think," she said, her warm brown eyes meeting his without a flicker of fear. "If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and join our royal story family. Your throne in this kingdom of stories is waiting for you." These passionate journeys of hearts colliding against all odds have brought together thousands of beautiful souls just like you. Make sure you hit the bell too, so you'll know immediately a new story drops. "Mr. Kane, your 9 a.m. is here," came the crisp voice of Margaret Thornfield through his intercom. At 52, Margaret had been his executive assistant for 8 years, long enough to remember when he still smiled genuinely, before success hardened him into the unforgiving man he'd become. "Send them in," Harrison replied, not looking up from the acquisition report spread across his desk. This was his kingdom, and everyone who entered knew exactly who ruled here. But 47 floors below, in the staff quarters of his residential building, a different kind of kingdom was stirring to life. Shania Brown stood before the small mirror in her studio apartment, carefully braiding her hair into a protective style that would survive a full day of work. At 28, she possessed the kind of natural beauty that didn't need enhancement. Warm brown skin that seemed to glow from within, expressive eyes that missed nothing, and a smile that could light up rooms when she chose to share it. She pulled on her crisp white uniform, not with resignation but with dignity. This wasn't her dream job, but it was honest work that paid her bills and allowed her to slowly chip away at the mountain of journalism school debt that had followed her since graduation. Besides, working as head housekeeper in Harrison Kane's penthouse provided her with observations that her former professors would have called invaluable anthropological research. "Good morning, Rosa," Shania called softly as she entered the building's staff kitchen, where the older woman was already preparing the morning's supplies. Rosa Martinez looked up with the warm smile that had made her a surrogate mother to every young woman who'd worked under her supervision. At 60, she'd spent 3 decades working for Manhattan's elite, and she'd learned to read people better than most therapists. "Morning, Mija. You ready for another day in the castle?" Shania chuckled, accepting the steaming cup of café con leche Rosa offered. If by ready you mean prepared to reorganize his life without him noticing, then yes. "That man." Rosa shook her head, but her expression held affection despite her disapproval. "Rigid as a board and twice as wooden, what he needs is someone to shake up that perfect world of his." Shania raised an eyebrow. "And why would anyone want to do that? Some people like their perfect, controlled lives." "Because, Nina, perfection is just fear wearing an expensive suit." An hour later, Shania emerged from Harrison's private elevator into his penthouse. Her cleaning supplies organized with military precision. She moved through the space like a silent ghost, maintaining the illusion that the apartment cleaned itself while he slept. But today, something would be different. Today, she would discover just how much control Harrison Kane actually had over his own life. She began in the main living area, noting the way every book was arranged by height rather than subject, how every magazine was positioned at precisely the same angle on his coffee table. It was beautiful, certainly, but it felt more like a museum than a home. Where were the signs of actual living? The tossed jacket, the half-read book left open, the coffee mug forgotten on a side table? Moving into his office, Shania paused. The space was magnificent but cold, all marble and steel and expensive leather. She'd cleaned this room hundreds of times, always working around his rigid organization system. But today, as she dusted his desk, she noticed something that made her journalism instincts tingle. Harrison's filing system was beautiful to look at, but completely impractical. Important documents were buried under less urgent papers, simply because they'd arrived later and he filed everything chronologically rather than by priority. His desk drawers were organized by supply type rather than frequency of use, meaning he had to open 3 different drawers to complete most tasks. Shania stood in the middle of his office, chewing her bottom lip thoughtfully. She wasn't just a housekeeper. She had a master's degree in journalism and had spent 4 years learning to organize information for maximum efficiency. The man was brilliant at building companies, but apparently clueless about organizing his personal workspace. Before she could think better of it, she was moving. Shania carefully photographed the exact placement of every item with her phone, then began to reorganize. She moved his most frequently accessed files to the top drawer, arranged his desk supplies within arm's reach of his chair, and relocated his reading materials to a more logical system based on priority rather than arrival date. In the bottom drawer, shoved behind a stack of quarterly reports, she found something that made her pause: a leather-bound journal filled with Harrison's handwriting. Not business notes, but something more personal. Thoughts about leadership, observations about human nature, even some surprisingly insightful commentary on social responsibility in business. She was so absorbed in reading that she didn't hear the private elevator's soft ding, didn't catch the whisper of expensive shoes on marble floors. It wasn't until his sharp intake of breath that she realized she was no longer alone. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Shania looked up to find Harrison Kane towering over her, his steel-gray eyes blazing with an anger that should have sent her scrambling for an apology. Instead, she felt a strange calm settle over her as she took in the picture he made. Jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin, hands fisted at his sides, expensive suit somehow making him look more vulnerable rather than more powerful. "I'm improving your efficiency," she said simply, setting his journal back on the desk with deliberate care. "Your filing system is beautiful, but it's not functional." For a moment, Harrison couldn't speak. In his entire adult life, no one, not board members, not business rivals, not even family, had ever dared to question his methods so calmly. Most people couldn't even maintain eye contact when he was pleased with them, let alone when he was furious. But this woman, this housekeeper who should be apologizing and backing away, sat in his chair as if she belonged there, studying him with the kind of intelligent assessment that made his skin feel too tight. "You had no right to touch my things," he managed, his voice deadly quiet. "You're right," Shania agreed, not moving from his chair. "I overstepped, but before you fire me, look at your desk. Really look at it." Against every instinct screaming at him to assert his authority, Harrison found himself glancing down at his workspace. Everything was exactly where it should be, but somehow also exactly where he needed it to be. His most important files were now within easy reach. His frequently used supplies no longer required a treasure hunt to find. "I've been watching you work," Shania continued, finally standing but not backing away. "You're wasting nearly 30 minutes every morning just searching for things that should be at your fingertips. For a man who values efficiency above all else, that seems..." "Seems what?" Harrison stepped closer, using his height advantage in a way that usually made people stumble over their words. Shania tilted her head, completely unintimidated. "Unnecessarily difficult." The air between them seemed to crackle with electricity. Harrison could smell her subtle perfume, something warm and clean that had nothing to do with the expensive fragrances worn by the women who typically occupied his space. He could see the steady rise and fall of her chest, could count the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "You run this company like a machine," she said softly, sliding the journal toward him across the desk surface. Their fingers brushed as he took it, and Harrison felt that brief contact like an electric shock. But machines don't change lives. People do. For several heartbeats, they stood in silence, the weight of something unnamed hanging between them. Harrison's pulse was racing in a way that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with the brave woman who had just turned his orderly world upside down. "Don't," he said finally, his voice rough, "ever touch my things again." Shania nodded, gathering her cleaning supplies with the same calm dignity she'd shown throughout their encounter. "Of course, Mr. Kane, though I should mention, the system I set up will save you about 2 hours per week, but I understand if you prefer the inefficiency." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Mr. Kane? That journal contains some truly insightful thoughts about leadership. Someone should read them." The next evening, Harrison stood in his living room adjusting the sound system for the third time. He'd changed clothes twice, settling on dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, formal enough to show respect for the lesson, casual enough to avoid intimidating her further. When the elevator announced Shania's arrival, his pulse quickened. She emerged wearing a simple black dress that somehow managed to be both elegant and understated. Her hair was swept up in a style that showcased the graceful line of her neck. "You look beautiful," he said, the words escaping before his usual filters could catch them. "Thank you." She moved into the living room, taking in the space he'd cleared for their lesson. "This feels very formal for someone who probably learned to waltz before she could drive." "Actually," Harrison admitted, "I learned because it was expected, not because I enjoyed it. My mother insisted that a gentleman should know how to properly escort a lady." "And did you? Properly escort ladies?" Harrison connected his phone to the sound system, allowing the soft strains of classical music to fill the room. The melody was elegant and romantic, something that would help them find their rhythm together. "I escorted appropriate companions to appropriate events. I'm not sure enjoyment ever factored into the equation." He turned to face her, extending his hand formally. "Shall we begin with the basic waltz position?" Shania placed her hand in his, and Harrison felt that same electric jolt he'd experienced when their fingers had brushed over his desk. But now, instead of pulling away, he stepped closer, placing his other hand on the small of her back. "The most important thing," he said, his voice coming out rougher than intended, "is trust. The lead needs to be clear but not forceful. The follow needs to feel what's coming next, not just react to what's already happened." "Like a conversation without words," Shania murmured. "Exactly." Harrison began moving them slowly around the room, keeping the steps simple. The scent of her hair, something like vanilla and warm spices, filled his senses. "Feel the rhythm first. Don't worry about your feet. Worry about the connection between us." But that connection was precisely what was making this so difficult. With each turn, each adjustment of their bodies, Harrison became more aware of her warmth, her scent, the way she bit her lower lip when concentrating. When she stumbled slightly, he caught her effortlessly, pulling her closer than strictly necessary. "Sorry," she breathed, looking up at him. "You're doing perfectly." His hand tightened on her back as he guided her through a simple turn. "Trust me." The words hung between them, loaded with meaning that went far beyond dance steps. Shania's eyes searched his face as if trying to decode something hidden in his expression. "Now," Harrison said, his voice barely above a whisper, "feel the music. Don't count the steps. Let the rhythm guide you." He pulled her closer, until she could feel the steady beat of his heart against her chest. The formal distance of ballroom dancing dissolved as they moved together. No longer student and teacher, but two people discovering they fit together perfectly. "Harrison," Shania said softly, as he guided her through a more complex sequence. "Yes?" "When you lead like this, with confidence instead of control, it's easier to follow." The observation hit him like a revelation. In the boardroom, he commanded. But here, with her, he was learning to lead through invitation rather than demand. The difference was transformative. As the song wound down, Harrison spun her out and back into his arms, catching her in a dip that left her breathless and looking up at him with something that resembled wonder. "You're a fast learner," he said, helping her back to her feet but not stepping away. "I have a good teacher." Her hands were still resting on his shoulders, his arms still around her waist. The music continued to play softly in the background, but neither of them moved to dance. "Harrison?" "Yes?" "At the gala? Will we dance like this?" "If you want to." He traced a thumb along her jawline, marveling at the softness of her skin. "But it might be dangerous." "Why?" "Because I might forget we're supposed to be maintaining professional boundaries." Shania's breath caught. "And if I said those boundaries were already gone?" Before Harrison could respond, his phone buzzed with an urgent message, breaking the spell between them. He stepped back reluctantly, checking the screen. "Vincent," he said, his jaw tightening. "My brother is flying in from London tonight. Unexpected business." "Is that a problem?" Harrison's expression darkened. "With Vincent, everything is a problem. He has a talent for complicating situations that were perfectly simple before he arrived." Shania sensed the shift in his mood and began collecting her purse. I should go. Let you prepare for his visit. Shania, wait. Harrison caught her hand as she moved toward the elevator. Saturday night? Are you sure you want to do this? Once we appear together at that gala, people will talk. They'll make assumptions about us, about why you're there. Let them talk. She squeezed his hand. I'm going because you asked me, and because I want to support something that matters. Whatever anyone else thinks is their problem, not ours. The elevator arrived, and she stepped inside, turning to face him as the doors began to close. Besides, she said with a smile that made his heart skip, I'm looking forward to putting all those dance lessons to good use. After she left, Harrison stood in his living room, the phantom sensation of her in his arms still making his skin tingle. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he was looking forward to a social event. Not because of the business opportunities, but because he wanted to watch Shania experience his world and see it through her eyes. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Vincent's name flashed on the screen. Brother, came the familiar British-accented voice. I trust you're ready for my arrival tomorrow. Since when do you announce business trips to New York? Vincent's laugh held an edge. Since I heard some interesting rumors about your personal life. Something about Harrison Kane becoming domesticated? I simply had to see this transformation for myself. Harrison's grip tightened on the phone. What exactly have you heard? Oh, this and that. Word travels fast in our circles, you know. Something about a housekeeper who's caught your attention? How wonderfully democratic of you. The condescension in Vincent's voice set Harrison's teeth on edge. Stay out of my personal business, Vincent. But your personal business is my business, brother. We share a company, after all. And if your judgment is becoming clouded by romantic entanglements with the help? Shania is not the help, Harrison said icily. She's an intelligent, educated woman who deserves your respect. Ah, so there is something there. How fascinating. I look forward to meeting this paragon of virtue who's managed to soften the great Harrison Kane. The line went dead, leaving Harrison with a cold dread in the pit of his stomach. Vincent had always been a master manipulator, using people's weaknesses against them. And Harrison had just revealed his greatest vulnerability. 2 days later, Saturday evening arrived with all the elegance and intensity Harrison had anticipated. He stood in front of his bedroom mirror, adjusting his black tie for the 4th time. He hadn't been this nervous about an event in years. But then again, he'd never cared so much about someone's opinion of his world. The sound of the elevator announced Shania's arrival, and Harrison took a deep breath before walking out to meet her. The vision that greeted him nearly stopped his heart. Shania stood in his foyer, wearing a midnight blue gown that hugged her curves perfectly before flowing into an elegant silhouette. The color made her skin glow like burnished gold, and her hair was styled in an updo that showcased diamond earrings he'd never seen before. You look. Harrison struggled for words. Absolutely stunning. Thank you. She touched the earrings self-consciously. Rosa lent these to me. She said they belonged to her grandmother. They're perfect on you. Harrison moved closer, offering his arm. Are you ready for this? Are you ready for people to meet me? Shania countered, placing her hand on his arm. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. The Whitmore Foundation Gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, its grand halls transformed into a glittering wonderland. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing lights across marble floors, creating an atmosphere of timeless elegance. As Harrison and Shania entered the main reception area, conversations paused and heads turned. Harrison felt the familiar weight of scrutiny, but for the first time he didn't care what anyone thought. Mr. Kane, James Whitmore approached with a warm smile and curious eyes. Good to see you, and you must be? Shania Brown, Harrison said proudly. Shania, this is James Whitmore, the Foundation's president. Miss Brown, what a pleasure. James shook her hand with genuine warmth. Harrison's told me so much about you. Shania shot Harrison a surprised look. He has? Oh yes. He's been raving about your insights into organizational efficiency and social responsibility. Says you've given him a fresh perspective on leadership. Throughout the evening, Harrison watched with growing pride as Shania navigated conversations with grace and intelligence. She spoke passionately with board members about education reform, listened intently to scholarship recipients' stories, and somehow made everyone she met feel heard and valued. "She's remarkable." Margaret appeared at Harrison's elbow, watching Shania speak with a group of young scholarship winners. "Look how they're responding to her." Harrison followed her gaze. Shania was kneeling slightly to be at eye level with a shy teenage girl, listening with complete focus as the girl shared her college dreams. The teenager's posture gradually relaxed, her smile growing brighter with each exchange. "She sees people," Harrison said softly, "really sees them. And you? Do you see her?" Harrison turned to look at Margaret, who was studying him with knowing eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean, do you see past the housekeeper to the woman? Past the employee to the partner you've been searching for without knowing it?" Before Harrison could respond, the orchestra began playing, and couples moved toward the dance floor. Harrison excused himself and made his way to Shania, who was still speaking with the scholarship recipients. "Ladies," he said, addressing the group with a warm smile that surprised even himself, "would you mind if I stole Miss Brown for a dance?" The teenagers giggled and whispered among themselves as Harrison offered Shania his hand. "Shall we?" On the dance floor, surrounded by Manhattan's elite, Harrison found himself forgetting about everything except the woman in his arms. The lessons in his living room had prepared them for the steps, but nothing could have prepared them for dancing together in public, for the feeling of claiming each other in front of the world. The crystal chandeliers above cast prisms of light across the polished floor, while the soft strains of a waltz filled the grand space. The scent of fresh gardenias from the centerpieces mingled with the subtle fragrance of Shania's perfume, creating an intoxicating atmosphere that made Harrison's head spin. "You're holding back," Shania murmured as they moved through the familiar patterns. "What do you mean?" "In your living room, you danced like you meant it. Here, you're dancing like you're performing." Harrison realized she was right. He'd become so conscious of the watching eyes that he'd retreated into formal politeness. "You want me to mean it?" "I want you to be yourself. The man who makes me hot chocolate at midnight, not the CEO who needs to maintain his image." Something shifted in Harrison's posture. His grip on her waist became more possessive, his lead more confident. He pulled her closer, close enough to feel the whisper of her breath against his neck as they turned, close enough to count her heartbeats where their bodies pressed together. "Better?" he asked, his voice lower now, meant only for her. "Much better." Shania's eyes sparkled with approval and something warmer. "Now everyone can see what I see." "And what do you see?" "A man who's tired of being perfect and ready to start being real." As the song neared its end, Harrison made a decision. Instead of the formal conclusion they'd practiced, he spun her out and pulled her back into a dramatic dip that drew applause from the other dancers. But he wasn't performing for them. He was claiming this moment, this woman, this feeling of rightness he'd never experienced before. "Harrison," Shania breathed as he helped her upright, her cheeks flushed and eyes bright. "I know we said business companion," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "But I'm finding it very difficult to pretend this is just business." Before she could respond, a familiar voice cut through their intimate bubble. Well, if it isn't my dear brother, making quite the spectacle of himself." Harrison's entire body tensed as Vincent approached, impeccably dressed and wearing the charming smile that Harrison knew masked calculated cruelty. Even from a distance, Vincent's presence seemed to change the atmosphere. Conversations grew more hushed, laughter more forced. "Vincent." Harrison's voice was controlled, but Shania could feel the change in him. The way his muscles coiled with tension, the way his hand tightened protectively on her back. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your companion?" Vincent's eyes assessed Shania with the kind of calculating interest that made her skin crawl. His gaze lingered inappropriately, cataloging her appearance with the detached interest of someone appraising property. "Shania Brown. This is my brother Vincent." "Vincent, Miss Brown." Vincent took Shania's hand, holding it longer than necessary as he studied her face. His grip was firm to the point of discomfort, his thumb pressing against her knuckles in a way that felt more like a power play than a greeting. Charming. Absolutely charming. Harrison always did have excellent taste in acquisitions. The insult was subtle but unmistakable. Shania felt Harrison stiffen beside her. But before he could respond, she smiled sweetly at Vincent, her journalist training allowing her to maintain composure while delivering a perfectly calibrated response. How kind of you to say, though I should clarify, I'm not an acquisition. I'm here as Harrison's guest because he values my perspective on the Foundation's work. I assume you're here for the same reason? Vincent's smile faltered slightly, caught off guard by her poised deflection. Of course, though I must admit I was surprised to hear that my brother had developed such personal interests in his household staff. The words hung in the air like a blade. Around them, other guests pretended not to listen while straining to catch every word. The orchestra continued playing, but the melody seemed to fade into background noise as tension crackled between the three of them. Harrison stepped forward, his voice dangerously quiet. Vincent? I'm simply curious about this newfound humanity of yours, brother. It's such a departure from your usual priorities. Have you ever watched someone you care about face judgment from people who matter to them? That protective instinct, that desire to shield them from cruelty. Share how you've handled those moments in the comments, if you'll excuse us, Harrison said, guiding Shania away from the dance floor. But the damage was done. Other guests had overheard enough to start whispering, and Shania could feel the weight of curious and judgmental stares following them across the room. In the museum's quieter sculpture gallery, Harrison stopped and turned to face her, his expression pained. The marble statues around them seemed to watch silently as he struggled with his emotions. Shania, I'm sorry. Vincent has a talent for poisoning everything he touches. It's not your fault. But Shania's joy from the evening had dimmed. She could still feel the condescension in Vincent's voice, the way he'd looked at her like she was something Harrison had purchased for entertainment. Though I should probably leave. I don't want to cause you any embarrassment. Embarrassment? Harrison cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. His touch was warm and reassuring, a stark contrast to Vincent's calculated coldness. You could never embarrass me. If anything, you make me proud. Proud to be seen with someone so genuine, so intelligent, so fearlessly herself. But he's right, isn't he? About what people will think? I don't care what people think. I care about what you think, about how you feel. Harrison's thumb traced her cheek, his voice growing more passionate. Do you want to leave? Shania looked into his eyes, seeing not the powerful CEO, but the man who made her hot chocolate, who listened to her stories, who danced with her like she was precious. She thought about all the times she'd let other people's opinions dictate her choices, all the opportunities she'd missed because she was afraid of judgment. No, I want to stay. I want to support something that matters, and I want to do it with you. Harrison's smile was radiant, transforming his entire face. Then we stay, together. They returned to the gala, and while the whispers continued, Shania noticed something else. The respect in people's eyes when they spoke with her, the way Harrison's business associates began treating her as someone whose opinion mattered, the warmth from Margaret and James Whitmore. As the evening wound down, Harrison and Shania found themselves on the museum's balcony, looking out over the city lights. The cool autumn air carried the scent of falling leaves and distant wood smoke, a welcome relief after the warmth of the crowded ballroom. Thank you, Harrison said quietly, his breath visible in the crisp air. For what? For staying. For not letting Vincent drive you away. For showing me what it feels like to be proud of who I'm with instead of just maintaining appearances. Shania turned to face him, her blue gown shimmering in the moonlight like liquid starlight. The city lights below created a backdrop of twinkling diamonds, but Harrison only had eyes for her. Harrison, what happens now? After tonight, we can't go back to pretending this is just professional. Harrison was quiet for a long moment, his hands gripping the balcony railing. The metal was cold under his palms, grounding him as emotions swirled through his chest. I don't know. I've never felt this way about anyone before. I don't have a roadmap for this. Neither do I. Shania stepped closer, close enough to feel his warmth radiating through his tuxedo jacket. But maybe we don't need a roadmap. Maybe we just need to trust each other." Harrison turned to her, and in the soft light from the museum windows, Shania could see the vulnerability he usually kept hidden behind his executive facade. "I'm not good at trust." "I know, but you trusted me enough to bring me here tonight. You trusted me enough to dance with me in front of everyone who matters in your world." She reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. "That's not nothing, Harrison." He leaned into her touch, his eyes closing briefly. "What if I hurt you? What if I revert to who I was before? Cold, controlling, impossible to be around. What if you don't? What if letting me see the real you is exactly what you needed to become who you're meant to be?" The question hung between them in the night air, filled with possibility and hope. Harrison looked at her, really looked at her, seeing not just her beauty but her strength, her courage, her unwavering belief in his capacity for good. "Shania," he whispered, and then his lips were on hers. The kiss was everything their dance had promised, passionate, tender, and full of all the emotions they'd been holding back. Shania's lips were soft and warm, tasting faintly of champagne and promise. When they finally separated, both were breathless, their hearts racing in perfect synchronization. "I should probably take you home," Harrison said, his forehead resting against hers. "Your home or mine?" The question carried layers of meaning, and they both knew it. Harrison pulled back to look at her, his expression serious but tender. "Mine, but just to talk. We have too much to figure out to rush this." Shania smiled, her heart swelling at his thoughtfulness. "I'd like that." As they waited for Harrison's car, Vincent appeared one last time, having clearly been waiting for an opportunity to speak privately with his brother. His earlier charm had evaporated completely, revealing the calculating predator beneath. "Harrison, a word?" Shania squeezed Harrison's hand. "I'll wait in the car." When she was out of earshot, Vincent dropped his charming facade entirely. "You're making a mistake, brother. This little romantic fantasy of yours is going to cost you everything. The only mistake would be listening to you. The board is already talking. Some ridiculous workplace romance with your housekeeper? They'll question your judgment, your fitness to lead. Everything we've built could crumble because you can't keep your personal life appropriate." Harrison stepped closer to his brother, his voice deadly quiet. "Let me be very clear, Vincent. Shania is not a mistake. She's not a weakness. She's the best thing that's happened to me in years, and if you do anything to hurt her or undermine what we have, you'll discover just how ruthless I can be when protecting what matters to me." Vincent's eyes narrowed, and for a moment his mask slipped completely, revealing years of resentment and jealousy. How touching. "But passion doesn't belong in our world, Harrison. It makes you vulnerable, predictable. Father would be ashamed of what you've become. Father was a bitter, lonely man who died alone because he chose power over people. If being like him means being ashamed of caring about someone, then yes, I'm nothing like him, and I'm grateful for it." Harrison turned and walked away, leaving Vincent standing alone under the museum lights. But as he slid into the car beside Shania, he couldn't shake the feeling that this confrontation was just the beginning. Vincent had never accepted defeat gracefully, and Harrison knew his brother well enough to recognize the calculating look in his eyes. Whatever Vincent was planning, Harrison would be ready for it. Because for the first time in his life, he had something worth fighting for that couldn't be measured in profit margins or stock prices. He had love, and he had Shania. The ride back to Harrison's penthouse was filled with comfortable silence, both lost in the magnitude of what had shifted between them. The city lights blurred past the windows as they sat close enough to feel each other's warmth but not quite touching, the air thick with unspoken promises. "Thank you," Shania said softly as they stopped at a red light, "for defending me back there." "You didn't need defending. You handled Vincent perfectly." Harrison's hand found hers, intertwining their fingers. "But I wanted him to know where I stand." "And where is that?" Harrison brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "With you. Whatever comes next, I want to face it with you." The penthouse felt different when they entered together. Less like a museum and more like a home. Shania slipped off her heels with a soft sigh of relief, her feet sinking into the plush carpet as she savored the sensation of being grounded again. "Would you like some of that hot chocolate?" Harrison asked, loosening his tie with practiced ease. "The real kind, not the pretentious truffle nonsense my chef usually makes." "I'd love some. But only if you let me make it this time. You've done enough tonight." In the kitchen, they moved around each other with an ease that belied their newness as anything more than employer and employee. Harrison watched as Shania heated milk in a saucepan, adding cocoa and spices with practiced precision. Her movements were graceful and sure, a stark contrast to the nervous energy that had filled the gala. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" he asked, leaning against the counter. "My grandmother. She raised me and Gabrielle after our parents." Shania paused, stirring the chocolate thoughtfully. The rich aroma filled the kitchen, warm and comforting. "Our father left when I was 12. Wei said he'd found something better than a family that was holding him back from his dreams." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It taught me that the only security worth having is what you build for yourself, and that promises from powerful men often come with expiration dates." The words hung heavy between them. Harrison moved closer, his expression pained. "Shania, I'm not him." "I know. That's what scares me." She looked up at him, vulnerability flickering in her eyes like candlelight. "Because if you were just another powerful man looking for a distraction, I could protect myself from you. But you're not. You're genuine, and that makes you dangerous to every wall I've built." Harrison cut face gently, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. "I don't want to be dangerous to you. I want to be safe harbor." "Can you be? When your brother and your board and your entire world think I'm just some opportunistic girl trying to upgrade her circumstances? My world can think whatever it wants. The only opinion that matters is yours." Harrison's voice was steady, filled with quiet conviction. "Do you think I see you as an upgrade or a gold digger? No, but Harrison, we both know this isn't that simple. Your success, your reputation, your empire, they all matter, and I won't be the reason you lose any of it. What if I told you that none of it matters without someone to share it with? What if I said I'd rather lose everything than lose you?" Shania searched his eyes, looking for the lie, the calculation, the ulterior motive she'd been trained to expect from powerful men. But all she saw was sincerity and a vulnerability that made her heart race. "I'd say you're either lying or you haven't thought this through." Harrison smiled, the tension breaking slightly. "Maybe both. But when have you ever known me to make decisions based on emotion rather than logic? Then trust that if I'm saying this, I mean it." They finished making the hot chocolate in companionable silence, stealing glances and soft touches as they moved around each other. When they settled on Harrison's couch with their steaming mugs, the city sprawled below them through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Shania felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years. "Harrison," she said quietly, "what happens on Monday morning?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, do I go back to cleaning your office and pretending we're just employer and employee? Do we sneak around like we're doing something wrong? What are we doing here?" Harrison set down his mug and turned to face her fully. "You're right. We need to figure this out. I've been thinking about offering you a different position. Margaret's been after me to hire a communications director for the foundation, someone who understands people, who can tell stories that matter. It would be a lateral move, salary-wise, but it would mean we're not breaking any company policies about workplace relationships," Shania finished. "Exactly. You'd be qualified, more than qualified, and it would be legitimate, not some made-up position to justify being together." Shania considered this, swirling the chocolate in her mug. The steam rose between them, carrying the comforting scent of vanilla and cinnamon. "And what if it doesn't work out? Between us, I mean, what if we realize this was just attraction and proximity and wishful thinking? Then you'd still have a job you're perfect for, working for a cause you believe in." Harrison reached for her hand. "Shania, I'm not asking you to give up your independence or become financially dependent on our relationship. I'm asking if you want to build something together, professionally and personally." "And your brother? The board? They'll say you're showing favoritism." "Let them. You'll prove yourself so quickly they'll forget how you got there." Harrison's confidence in her was absolute and unwavering. Besides, I've made plenty of business decisions they questioned. This time, I'm just more personally invested in the outcome. Shania laughed despite herself. When you put it like that? Is that a yes? She looked at him sitting there in his slightly rumpled tuxedo, his hair falling across his forehead, his eyes bright with hope and nervousness. This man who commanded boardrooms and built empires was asking her, really asking, not demanding or assuming, to take a chance on building something with him. Yes, she said softly, it's a yes. Harrison's relief was palpable. He pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her as she settled against his chest. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights twinkle below them like fallen stars. Shania? Tomorrow, would you like to see something? Something I've never shown anyone? She looked up at him curiously. What kind of something? A room in this apartment that's been locked for 3 years. A part of myself I buried when I decided emotion was a luxury I couldn't afford. Are you sure you want to share that with me? Harrison pressed a kiss to the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The next morning dawned clear and bright, Sunday sunshine streaming through Harrison's massive windows. Shania woke on his couch where she'd fallen asleep against his chest, covered by a cashmere throw. Harrison was already awake, watching her with a soft expression that made her heart flutter. Good morning, she said, stretching and immediately feeling self-conscious about her rumpled gown and smudged makeup. Good morning, beautiful. Harrison stood and offered her his hand. Coffee first, or would you like to see that room I mentioned? 20 minutes later, armed with steaming mugs of coffee, Harrison led Shania down a hallway she'd cleaned dozens of times but never thought to explore. At the end was a door she'd assumed led to a closet or storage room. Harrison paused with his hand on the doorknob, his expression vulnerable. When I was younger, before the company, before success consumed everything, I used to create things. Art. It was how I processed the world. How I made sense of emotions I didn't know how to express. He turned the key and opened the door. Shania gasped. The room was filled with light from tall windows she hadn't known existed from the outside. Easels holding canvases lined the walls, some finished paintings, others half-completed sketches. A drafting table sat in one corner, covered with charcoal pencils and brushes. The art wasn't what she expected from a billionaire CEO. These weren't expensive acquisitions or cold abstracts. They were warm, human, emotional. Portraits of people Harrison had clearly known and cared about. Landscapes that captured not just scenery but feelings. Abstract pieces that seemed to pour pain and hope and longing onto canvas. Harrison, she breathed, moving toward a painting of an older woman with kind eyes and weathered hands. These are incredible. That's my grandmother. She raised me after my parents died. Harrison's voice was tight with emotion. She's the one who taught me that success means nothing if you're alone at the top. Shania moved through the room slowly, taking in each piece. There were paintings of what looked like a younger Harrison with friends, candid moments of joy and connection, landscapes that seemed to capture specific memories, a lakeside sunset, a mountain meadow, an old cafe in what might have been Paris. When did you stop? She asked, pausing in front of an unfinished canvas that showed the New York skyline but softened somehow, made more human. 3 years ago, when Sarah left. Sarah? Harrison's jaw tightened. We were engaged. I thought she loved me, but it turned out she loved the idea of being Mrs. Harrison Kane more than she loved Harrison himself. When she found out I was considering selling the company to focus on smaller, more personal projects, she left. Said she didn't sign up to marry someone who would choose happiness over success. Shania's heart ached for him. So you buried this part of yourself. I decided emotion was a weakness, that trust was dangerous, that the only way to protect myself was to become the image everyone expected, the ruthless CEO who cared about nothing but profit. But you kept the room. I locked it, told myself I'd sell the art, get rid of everything, but I never could. Harrison moved to stand beside her. Until yesterday, no one even knew this room existed. Shania turned to face him, seeing not the powerful businessman but the artist whose soul was spread across these canvases. Why are you showing me this now? Because you see me. the real me. And for the first time in 3 years, I don't want to hide who I really am. Harrison reached for her hands, because being with you makes me want to create again. Makes me remember that success without joy is just expensive emptiness. Shania felt tears prick her eyes. Harrison, you don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know, this is who I really am. Not just the CEO or the billionaire or the man who demands perfection from everyone around him. I'm someone who sees beauty and wants to capture it. Someone who feels deeply and used to express those feelings. Someone who dreams of more than just market dominance. Shania stepped closer, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. Thank you for trusting me with this. Thank you for making me remember it exists. She kissed him then, soft and sweet, tasting coffee and vulnerability and the promise of something real. When they broke apart, Harrison rested his forehead against hers. Shania, I want you to know something else. Whatever challenges we face, Vincent, the board, society's expectations, I won't let them change me back into who I was before you. You've reminded me that being fully human isn't a weakness, it's strength. And you've taught me that some powerful men are worth trusting, that vulnerability isn't the same as powerlessness. They spent the morning in the art room, Harrison explaining the stories behind various pieces, while Shania shared her observations with the eye of someone who understood narrative and emotion. It felt like sharing secrets, like building intimacy through honesty, rather than physical proximity. But their peaceful morning was interrupted by the sharp ring of Harrison's phone. Margaret? Harrison answered, frowning at the unusual Sunday call. Harrison, I'm sorry to bother you, but we have a situation. Vincent called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. He's claiming there are concerns about your recent behavioral changes affecting your leadership capabilities. Harrison's entire demeanor shifted, the relaxed artist disappearing behind the sharp-eyed CEO. What kind of concerns? Apparently, some board members witnessed your public display at the gala and are questioning whether your judgment has been compromised. Vincent is painting it as a pattern of increasingly erratic behavior. That bastard. Harrison's knuckles were white as he gripped the phone. He planned this. I'm afraid there's more. Someone, and I think we both know who, has been spreading rumors about inappropriate workplace relationships and suggesting that company policies are being selectively enforced. Shania watched Harrison's expression grow darker with each word, feeling the walls she'd watched him lower slowly rebuilding themselves. What does Vincent want? Harrison asked. A vote of no confidence. He's positioning himself as the responsible choice to take over day-to-day operations while you focus on personal matters. Like hell he is. Harrison ended the call and turned to Shania, his expression apologetic but determined. I have to handle this. I know. Shania felt the weight of reality settling back around them. Harrison, maybe I should step back. If my presence is causing problems for you. No. Harrison's voice was firm. We talked about this. I'm not letting him manipulate me into hiding who I care about or being ashamed of finding happiness. But if it costs you your company, then we'll build something new together, something better. Harrison pulled her close. Shania, I meant what I said last night. I'd rather lose everything than lose you. But I'm not planning to lose either. What are you going to do? A smile spread across Harrison's face. Not warm and gentle like the one she'd grown to love, but sharp and predatory. The CEO was back, and he was ready for war. I'm going to remind everyone why I built this empire in the first place, and I'm going to show Vincent that underestimating my resolve was the biggest mistake of his life. As Harrison immediately began making phone calls to allies and board members, Shania felt a chill of premonition. The peaceful morning in the art room felt like a dream already fading. Tomorrow would bring a fight not just for Harrison's company, but for their chance at happiness together. But watching him work, seeing the brilliant strategist emerge, the man who had built an empire through sheer force of will, Shania knew Vincent had made a crucial miscalculation. He'd assumed love would make Harrison weak. Instead, it had given him something worth fighting for. Monday morning arrived with the weight of destiny. Harrison stood in his office at 6 a.m., dressed in his most intimidating charcoal suit, reviewing the files Margaret had compiled overnight. Every phone call had been made, every alliance confirmed or tested. Now came the reckoning. Shania arrived at her usual time, but instead of heading to begin her cleaning duties, she knocked on Harrison's office door. When he looked up, she was holding a cup of his grandmother's hot chocolate recipe and wearing the kind of fierce expression that had first caught his attention in this very room. "I thought you might need some courage for facing today," she said, setting the mug on his desk. Harrison stood and pulled her close, breathing in her comforting scent. "What if this all goes wrong? What if Vincent succeeds? Then we'll face whatever comes next together." "But Harrison?" She pulled back to look at him. "Don't you dare let him make you forget who you really are. You're not just a CEO. You're a man who creates beauty, who cares about people, who has the courage to love and be loved. That's your strength, not your weakness." "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "You didn't find me. You let me find you. There's a difference." At exactly 10 a.m., Harrison walked into the boardroom where the emergency meeting had been called. The 12 board members were already seated around the polished mahogany table, their expressions ranging from curious to concerned to openly hostile. Vincent sat at the far end, wearing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Gentlemen, ladies," Harrison said, taking his place at the head of the table. "I understand there are concerns about my leadership that require immediate discussion." Board member Thomas Chen spoke first, his voice careful and measured. "Harrison, we've been hearing rumors about changes in your personal life that may be affecting your professional judgment." "Such as?" It was Vincent who answered, his British accent making his words sound even more condescending. "Such as your very public display at Saturday's gala." "Really, Harrison, making such a spectacle with your housekeeper? What sort of message does that send about our company's values?" "It sends the message that we judge people by their character and capabilities, not their job titles or social status," Harrison replied evenly. "Come now," Vincent continued, "surely you can see how inappropriate it is to flaunt a workplace affair. What's next? Are we to promote every pretty cleaning lady who catches your fancy?" Several board members shifted uncomfortably at Vincent's crude language. Harrison's hands clenched slightly, but his voice remained controlled. "Miss Brown is a highly educated professional with a journalism degree, who has demonstrated exceptional organizational skills and insight into our operations. If anyone has concerns about her qualifications for any position in this company, I'd be happy to discuss them based on merit rather than gossip." Board member Sarah Rodriguez leaned forward. "Harrison, no one is questioning the young woman's qualifications. We're questioning yours. Your judgment. The board has a responsibility to ensure that personal entanglements don't compromise business decisions." "And what decisions have been compromised?" Vincent pulled out a folder, sliding copies across the table to each member. "These reports show a marked change in your behavior patterns over the past month. Extended evening hours in the building, alterations to your schedule, and most concerning, this new interest in humanizing corporate policies." "You mean the policies that have increased employee satisfaction by 30% and reduced turnover by 25% in just 3 weeks?" "I mean the policies that prioritize worker comfort over efficiency and profit," Vincent shot back. "Father didn't build this company by coddling employees or making emotional decisions." Harrison stood slowly, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Our father built a successful company, yes. He also died alone, estranged from both his sons, having never experienced a single moment of genuine human connection in his adult life. If that's your definition of success, Vincent, then we have very different goals." The room fell silent. Vincent's carefully composed mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the fury beneath. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison continued, moving to the window overlooking the city. 3 months ago, this company was profitable but stagnant. Employee morale was at an all-time low. Public perception was that we were a cold corporate machine that valued profits over people, and innovation had practically ground to a halt. He turned back to face the room. "In the past month, since implementing new policies focused on employee well-being and social responsibility, we've seen our stock price rise 12%, landed 3 major new contracts from companies that specifically cited our improved corporate culture, and launched 2 innovative projects that have the potential to revolutionize our industry. Due to your relationship with your maid, Vincent said with a sneer. Due to my willingness to listen to perspectives I had previously ignored. Due to remembering that this company exists to serve people, not just to generate wealth. And yes, due to someone extraordinary who reminded me that being human isn't a weakness to overcome but a strength to embrace. Margaret entered the room quietly, placing a stack of documents in front of Harrison before whispering something in his ear. His expression sharpened. "Since we're discussing judgment and qualifications," Harrison said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge, "perhaps we should examine some recent financial irregularities that have come to my attention." Vincent's face went white. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that our overnight audit revealed several unauthorized transactions from company accounts. Transfers to offshore holdings that bear a striking resemblance to investments we discussed in private but never approved." Harrison began walking around the table, placing documents in front of each board member. "I'm talking about consulting fees paid to firms that exist only on paper, managed by individuals with interesting connections to your personal investment portfolio." "You can't prove anything," Vincent said, but his voice had lost its confident edge. "Actually, I can. The beauty of modern financial software is that it tracks everything. Every transaction, every authorization code, every digital fingerprint." Harrison returned to his seat, leaning back with deadly calm. "The question isn't whether you've been embezzling from this company, Vincent. The question is whether I handle this internally or turn it over to federal prosecutors." The board members were passing the evidence between them, their expressions growing more shocked and angry with each page. Years of carefully hidden theft and manipulation were laid bare in black and white. "This is fabricated," Vincent said desperately. "He's trying to deflect attention from his own poor judgment by manufacturing a crisis. Then you won't mind if we call in an independent auditing firm to verify these findings. I'm sure they'll be fascinated by these Cayman Islands accounts that happen to share transaction dates with missing company funds." Vincent stood abruptly, his chair clattering backward. "You self-righteous bastard. You think you're better than me? Better than father? You're weak, Harrison. This sentimentality, this pathetic neediness for approval and affection, it will destroy everything we've built." "Everything I built," Harrison corrected quietly. "While you were in London playing at being a businessman, I was here creating an empire. And while you were scheming to steal from it, I was learning how to make it better." "Because of some girl who makes you feel special? What happens when she realizes what you really are? What happens when she leaves, just like Sarah did?" Harrison stood, and for the first time in the meeting, his control slipped slightly. "Shania is nothing like Sarah. She sees me, the real me, and chooses to stay anyway. She's not impressed by wealth or power. She's inspired by purpose and authenticity. She understands that true strength comes from caring about others, not from crushing them." How touching. "And what happens to this company when your little romance inevitably implodes? Then this company will be stronger for having learned that human connections aren't weaknesses to be exploited, but foundations to be built upon." Thomas Chen cleared his throat. "Harrison, I think we've heard enough. Vincent, these financial irregularities are extremely serious. I move that we suspend you from all board activities pending a full investigation." "Seconded" came immediately from Sarah Rodriguez. "All in favor?" Harrison called. Every hand except Vincent's rose into the air. Vincent looked around the room in disbelief, realizing that his carefully orchestrated coup had not only failed, but had exposed his own crimes. "You'll regret this, Harrison. All of you will regret this." "Vincent," Harrison said, as his brother moved toward the door, "For what it's worth, I'm sorry it came to this. I genuinely hoped you could change. Save your pity for someone who needs it, and Harrison, enjoy your little fairy tale while it lasts. Reality has a way of crushing dreamers." After Vincent left, followed by security, the boardroom was quiet for several minutes. Finally, Thomas Chen spoke. "Harrison, I owe you an apology. We all do. We let personal concerns cloud our judgment about your leadership. No apology necessary. Your concerns were legitimate. A CEO's personal life can affect their professional judgment. I just hope I've demonstrated that in this case, my personal growth has enhanced rather than hindered my professional capabilities. The numbers certainly support that conclusion, Sarah Rodriguez said. Harrison, this company has shown more innovation and growth in the past month than in the previous year. Whatever or whoever has inspired this change, we support it. As the meeting disbanded and board members filed out, offering words of support and renewed confidence, Harrison remained seated, processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. Margaret approached with a gentle smile. "Well fought, sir. Your father would be proud." "No, Margaret. My father would have handled this very differently. He would have let Vincent's attack succeed, rather than risk showing vulnerability or admitting that caring about someone made him stronger." Harrison stood and straightened his tie. "For the first time in my life, I'm glad I'm nothing like him." He left the boardroom and headed directly to where he knew Shania would be waiting. He found her in the staff break room, ostensibly organizing supplies, but obviously anxious about the meeting's outcome. Rosa sat beside her, providing silent support. "Well?" Shania asked as soon as she saw him. Harrison smiled, the first genuine smile he'd worn all morning. "Vincent won't be a problem anymore. The board has voted to suspend him pending investigation, and I suspect he'll be far too busy with lawyers to interfere in our lives." Shania exhaled in relief, but Harrison could see the worry still lingering in her eyes. "What is it?" he asked. "This won't be the end of it, will it? There will always be people who think I'm not good enough for your world, who see our relationship as inappropriate or opportunistic." Harrison knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "Shania, look at me. There will always be people who judge what they don't understand, but for every Vincent in my world, there are dozens of board members like Thomas and Sarah who care about character over class, about merit over money." "But what about your employees? Your social circle? Won't they always see me as the maid who got lucky?" Rosa spoke up from her seat across the table. "Mija, let me tell you something I learned working for rich folks for 30 years. The people worth knowing don't care where you came from. They care where you're going and who you're choosing to become." Harrison squeezed Shania's hands. "Rosa's right, and besides, you're not going to be defined by any job title for long." "What do you mean?" "I mean that Margaret just informed me that the Whitmore Foundation received 5 applications for the communications director position this morning. But there's only one candidate I'm interested in interviewing." Shania's eyes widened. "Harrison, you can't just offer me the job because I'm not offering. I'm asking you to apply, to interview, to earn the position on your own merits. Margaret will handle the hiring process to ensure everything is completely above board." "But Shania?" Harrison's smile was confident and proud. "I have no doubt that you'll be the best candidate they see. And if we don't work out, personally I mean, then you'll still have a job you love, working for a cause you believe in, with people who respect and value you." Harrison stood and helped her to her feet. "I'm not asking you to risk your independence for our relationship. I'm asking you to build a life that makes you happy, regardless of what happens between us." But as he looked into her eyes, both of them knew something had fundamentally changed between them that morning. The external threats had only strengthened their bond, proven that they could face challenges together and emerge stronger. "I suppose I should update my resume," Shania said with a small smile. "I suppose you should. Though fair warning, the Foundation's current communications are terrible. You'll have your work cut out for you." "Good thing I like challenges." Harrison pulled her close, uncaring for once about who might see them. "Good thing I like brilliant women who aren't afraid to reorganize my entire life." "Mr. Kane," Rosa interrupted with a grin, "maybe you should take your girl somewhere more private for all this romance. Some of us are trying to eat lunch." Harrison laughed, genuinely laughed, for the first time since Vincent's threat had materialized. "You're absolutely right, Rosa. Shania, would you like to see more of that room I showed you yesterday? I'm thinking of starting a new painting, and I could use a model." "What kind of painting?" "The kind that captures the moment everything changed. The kind that shows a man discovering that surrender isn't defeat, it's transformation." As they left the break room together, Shania felt a lightness she hadn't experienced since childhood. The challenges weren't over, they both knew that. There would be more obstacles, more people who disapproved, more moments when their different backgrounds created tension. But they would face it all together. And that made all the difference. 2 weeks later, on a crisp autumn evening, the Kane Building's executive floor buzzed with excitement. The Whitmore Foundation was hosting its annual scholarship gala, but this year's event was different. More personal, more meaningful, more aligned with the values that had transformed both the foundation and its primary benefactor. Harrison stood in his office, adjusting his bow tie for the third time. The nervous energy he felt had nothing to do with public speaking or business presentations. Tonight, he had plans that went far beyond fundraising. "You look perfect," Shania said, entering the office in a stunning emerald green gown that made her skin glow like burnished gold. In the months since joining the foundation, she had transformed not just their communications strategy, but their entire approach to community engagement. The stories she told about their scholarship recipients had doubled their donations and tripled their volunteer participation. "So do you," Harrison replied, but his voice carried an unusual tremor. "Are you nervous about your speech? You've given hundreds of presentations." "It's not the speech I'm nervous about." Harrison moved to his desk, pulling out a small velvet box that made Shania's breath catch. "Harrison." "Shania, wait. Let me say this before I lose my nerve." Harrison dropped to one knee, opening the box to reveal not a massive diamond designed to impress, but an elegant sapphire surrounded by smaller diamonds that caught the light like stars. "This ring belonged to my grandmother, the woman who taught me that true wealth lies in love, not possessions." Shania's hands flew to her mouth, tears already forming in her eyes. 6 months ago, I thought happiness was a luxury I couldn't afford. I had convinced myself that emotions were weaknesses, that control was strength, that success meant never needing anyone. Harrison's voice was steady now, filled with the conviction that came from absolute certainty. "Then you walked into my life and reorganized everything. Not just my desk, but my heart, my priorities, my understanding of what it means to truly live." "Harrison," Shania whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You've shown me that vulnerability is courage, that partnership is stronger than dominance, that the best parts of myself are the ones I tried to hide. Shania Brown, you are my heart, my home, my partner in every sense of the word. Will you marry me?" For a moment, Shania couldn't speak. She looked at this incredible man kneeling before her. Not the stern CEO who commanded boardrooms, but the artist who painted her by moonlight. The man who made her hot chocolate when sleep eluded her. The partner who supported her dreams while never trying to diminish her independence. "Yes," she breathed, then louder. "Yes, yes, of course yes." Harrison slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then stood and pulled her into his arms. Their kiss was passionate but tender, a promise of all the tomorrows they would share. "It's perfect," Shania said, admiring the ring through her tears. "But Harrison, how did you know sapphires were my favorite?" "Because you told me once that they reminded you of twilight over the ocean, beautiful but strong enough to last forever." Harrison wiped her tears gently. "Just like us." A soft knock at the door interrupted their moment. Margaret peeked in, then smiled broadly at the scene before her. "I take it she said yes?" "She said yes," Harrison confirmed, his arm around Shania's waist. "Wonderful. The guests are arriving for the gala. Are you ready to share your good news with the world?" Harrison looked at Shania, who nodded with a radiant smile. "More than ready." The gala was everything they had envisioned, elegant but warm, impressive but approachable. Scholarship recipients mingled with board members, their stories bridging the gap between privilege and promise. The art displayed throughout the venue included several pieces from Harrison's collection, his return to creating having inspired others to support arts education programs. When Harrison took the stage to give his keynote address, the audience quieted expectantly. But instead of the typical fundraising speech, he offered something more personal. 6 months ago, if someone had told me that I would be standing here tonight, not just as CEO of Kane Technologies or chairman of the Whitmore Foundation, but as a man who had learned to lead with his heart as well as his mind. I would have thought they were delusional. Gentle laughter rippled through the crowd. I built my career on the belief that emotions were liabilities, that personal connections were weaknesses to be managed. I was successful by any external measure, but I was also profoundly alone. His eyes found Shania in the audience, and his smile softened. Then I met someone who challenged everything I thought I knew about strength, about leadership, about what it means to be truly powerful. Someone who showed me that the greatest courage isn't in commanding others, but in allowing yourself to be vulnerable with someone who deserves your trust. Harrison paused, pulling the microphone closer. Today, that extraordinary woman agreed to become my wife. The audience erupted in applause as Shania blushed and waved from her table. Harrison waited for the noise to die down before continuing. I'm sharing this with you not just because we're celebrating, but because it represents everything this foundation stands for. We believe that everyone deserves the chance to transform their circumstances through education, through opportunity, through connection. We believe that where you come from doesn't determine where you can go. He gestured to the scholarship recipients seated at tables throughout the room. Every person here tonight is proof that talent and determination can overcome any barrier. That with the right support and opportunity, anyone can achieve extraordinary things. My fiancée, Dr. Shania Brown, epitomizes this belief. She transformed her circumstances through education, changed my company through innovation, and revolutionized this foundation through authentic storytelling. She is living proof that worth isn't determined by wealth or status, but by character, capability, and the courage to pursue your dreams. The applause was thunderous. Shania felt overwhelmed by the love and support radiating from the room. Board members who had become friends, scholarship recipients who had become family, colleagues who had become champions of her vision. As the evening continued with dinner and dancing, Harrison and Shania found themselves once again on a dance floor. But this time, instead of tentative steps in an uncertain relationship, they moved with the confidence of people who belong together. Any regrets? Harrison asked as he spun her slowly. About what? About saying yes to the crazy billionaire who asked you to reorganize his entire life. Shania laughed, the sound like music to his ears. Only one regret. Harrison's expression grew concerned. What's that? That I waited so long to tell you that you're not as ruthless as you think. She echoed the words she'd spoken that first day, when she'd sat behind his desk and unknowingly begun the process of changing both their lives forever. I suppose I owe you a debt of gratitude for that observation. You can pay me back by dancing with me like this for the next 50 years. Only 50? Well, let's start there and see how it goes. As the gala wound down and guests began to leave, Harrison and Shania stood on the building's rooftop terrace, looking out over the city that had brought them together. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and possibility, and Shania snuggled closer to Harrison's warmth. What happens now? She asked. I mean, after the wedding, after we settle into married life. What dreams haven't we talked about yet? Harrison was quiet for a moment, considering. I want to expand the foundation internationally, create scholarship programs in developing countries, use art therapy to help traumatized communities heal, build something that will outlast us both. That sounds incredible. What else? I want to paint again, seriously this time. Maybe even have a showing with proceeds going to the foundation, Harrison smiled. I want to travel with you, show you all the places I visited for business but never really saw because I was too focused on profit margins. And personally, what do you want for us? Harrison turned to face her fully, his expression serious but joyful. I want to build a family with you, if you want that too. I want our children to grow up understanding that wealth is a tool for good, not a measure of worth. I want them to see their parents as partners who chose each other every day. Shania felt her heart swell. I want all of that too, and I want to write, really write again. Maybe a book about second chances, about how love can transform not just individuals but entire communities. About us? About us? About the scholarship recipients, about everyone who proves that your past doesn't determine your future. Shania leaned into him. Maybe I'll call it the CEO who lost control. Harrison laughed. Not bad, though I prefer to think of it as the CEO who found himself. Even better. They stood in comfortable silence, each lost in dreams of the future they would build together. The city lights twinkled below them like fallen stars, each one representing a life, a hope. Shania, Harrison said quietly, thank you. For what? For seeing past everything I thought I was to who I could become. For having the courage to reorganize not just my office, but my entire understanding of what matters. For teaching me that love isn't something to control, but something to celebrate. Thank you for showing me that not all powerful men are like my father. That some use their strength to protect, not possess. That vulnerability shared between equals isn't weakness, it's the foundation of something unbreakable. As they made their way back inside, Harrison paused at his office door. On impulse, he unlocked it and led Shania inside, turning on just the desk lamp that created an intimate pool of light. This is where it all began, he said, gesturing to his perfectly organized desk. Right here in this room, you changed my life. We changed each other's lives, Shania corrected. And this is just the beginning. Harrison pulled her close, and in the soft light of the office where their story had begun, they kissed with the passion of new lovers and the depth of soulmates who had found their home in each other. Outside, the city hummed with its endless energy. But inside, in the sanctuary they had created together, Harrison Kane and Shania Brown had everything they needed: love, partnership, purpose, and the unwavering belief that their best days were still ahead. The stern billionaire CEO had lost control of his carefully ordered world, and in doing so, had gained everything he never knew he wanted. The fearless woman who had dared to challenge him had found a partner worthy of her courage and dreams. Together, they were proof that love doesn't conquer all. It transforms everything it touches, creating beauty from brokenness and hope from despair. And in their happiness, they became an inspiration to everyone whose life they touched, showing that the greatest success story isn't about accumulating wealth or power, but about having the courage to be vulnerable enough to love and be loved in return. Have you ever been brave enough to completely reorganize someone's world? Sometimes the biggest transformations start with the smallest gestures of courage. Share your thoughts in the comments about moments when vulnerability led to unexpected strength. Their story reminds us that we all deserve a love that sees our true worth, challenges us to be better, and supports us in becoming who we're meant to be. Because in the end, we are all royalty. Not because of what we own, but because of the love we're brave enough to give and receive. Keep living like the kings and queens you are, with hearts wide open to love's transforming power. And remember, your worth isn't determined by others' expectations, but by your own courage to live authentically and love completely. Until our next story, may you find the strength to reorganize not just the spaces around you, but the walls around your heart. Because sometimes the most beautiful transformations begin with someone who dares to see us differently than we see ourselves. Their story reminds me that we all have hidden galleries in our hearts, secret spaces where our real selves create beauty despite the world's harshness. What masterpiece are you creating in your private moments? What vulnerable truth are you afraid to share? Remember, you are royalty not because of what you own, but because of the love you're brave enough to give and receive. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to join our Royal Story family. Your presence makes this community a palace of healing and hope. Share in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between safety and love? What gave you the courage to follow your heart? Your stories inspire future tales. Tomorrow, another story of hearts finding home against impossible odds awaits. Until then, remember, you are worthy of a love that sees your true value and brave enough to claim it when it appears. Keep living authentically, loving boldly, and never forget that the greatest empire you can build is a heart wide open to connection and joy.